Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt stuck? Like no matter what you do, life keeps throwing the same challenges at you, over and over again? I want to share a secret with you today. A secret so powerful that most people live their entire lives without ever knowing it. Your old self must die, for your new self to rise. Sounds harsh, doesn't it? But think about it. You can't plant a new tree in the ground without first removing the weeds. You can't step into the sun while staying chained in the shadows. And you certainly can't become who you're meant to be if you keep clinging to old habits, old fears, old doubts. Florence Scovel Shinn'S, a pioneer of metaphysical wisdom, called it a forbidden secret. She knew that transformation doesn't come from adding something new, it comes from letting go of the old. Look at a caterpillar. It must literally dissolve itself in the cocoon before it emerges as a butterfly. Painful? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. And what about us? How many of us are holding on to our caterpillar selves? Our self-doubt, our limiting beliefs, our toxic relationships, our comfort zones? Let me tell you a story. I had a friend, let's call him Mark. Mark wanted to start his own business. He had the skills, the ideas, but every time he tried, he failed. Why? Because he kept being the same Mark. The Mark who feared rejection. The Mark who believed he wasn't worthy. The Mark who complained more than he acted. One day, he made a choice. A choice to die to the old Mark. He stopped listening to that inner critic. He stopped being paralyzed by fear. And slowly, painfully, deliberately, he became a new Mark. Today, he runs a thriving company, and the old Mark? He's gone. Friends, it's not just about courage, it's about surrender. Letting go. Choosing to release what no longer serves you. Ask yourself, are you willing to die to your old self? Are you ready to shed the layers that keep you small? Transformation is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. But the moment you embrace it, the moment you step through that fire of change, you are reborn. Think about your dreams. The life you crave. The freedom, the joy, the abundance. Do you want it badly enough to let the old you fall away? Here's the truth. The universe cannot bring in the new while the old clings to life. The door to your future swings open only when your past releases its grip. So today, I challenge you. Burn the bridges that hold you back. Release the habits, the doubts, the fears. Step boldly into your rebirth. Because on the other side of your death lies your resurrection. And that resurrection? It's magnificent. It's unstoppable. It's you, unleashed. So, my friends, are you ready to die, so that you may rise? The choice is yours. Thank you. Following are the key points you will listen in this video. Transformation requires letting go of your old self, old habits, fears, and limiting beliefs. Real change is often painful but necessary, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Surrender and release are essential steps to stepping into your new life. Holding onto the past blocks your future. Change begins with decisive action. Courage alone is not enough. Commitment to inner transformation is what creates lasting success. True rebirth and personal growth lead to freedom, abundance, and your highest potential. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and looking at yourself, not the face you see, but the version of you that's held onto every doubt, every fear, every old habit that no longer serves you. That version of yourself might feel safe, comfortable, familiar. But here's the thing about comfort. It's a cage. It's a cage with invisible bars, a cage that whispers to you, stay here, you're fine. And yet, deep down, you know you're meant for something more. You can feel it in your bones. You can feel it in your heart. You can feel it in the restless energy that wakes you up at 3 a.m., the silent yearning that tugs at your soul. Transformation begins the moment you realize that the person staring back at you is not who you need to be. It begins the moment you acknowledge that the habits, the fears, the self-limiting beliefs you've carried for years are holding you hostage. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to try something new, something bold, but that familiar voice whispered, "You're not ready," or "This isn't for you"? That voice is your old self, clinging to the past, desperate to keep you small. Florence Scovel Shinn'S described this in her work as the forbidden secret of personal evolution, the realization that nothing new can take root until the old self is consciously released. I want you to picture a man named Daniel. Daniel had a dream of becoming a writer. He carried it in his heart for over a decade, scribbling notes, filling journals, and daydreaming of seeing his name on a book cover. But every time he tried to submit his work, he sabotaged himself. He told himself the market was too competitive. He told himself he wasn't talented enough. He even told himself, sometimes in whispers he barely acknowledged, that he didn't deserve success. Daniel's old self, the self bound by fear, insecurity, and self-doubt, was like an anchor, dragging him into the depths of inaction. One evening, Daniel sat on his porch, staring at the stars, feeling the weight of years wasted. A thought came to him, almost like a whisper from the universe: the old Daniel cannot create the new Daniel. At that moment, he realized the truth. He had to let go of the man who was afraid, the man who doubted himself, the man who hid behind excuses. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. And it wasn't easy. Letting go of the old self is like ripping out roots that have intertwined with your soul. It's painful. It's messy. It's terrifying. But it is the only path to freedom. Daniel started small. He began by confronting the negative voices in his mind. When fear whispered that he would fail, he responded with action instead of avoidance. When doubt tried to convince him he was unworthy, he reminded himself of his past accomplishments and the joy he felt writing. Slowly, deliberately, he dismantled the old Daniel piece by piece. The man who once feared judgment began submitting short stories. The man who once felt unworthy started networking with other writers. And one day, the impossible became possible. Daniel published his first novel. The old self didn't vanish entirely, it never does. But Daniel had consciously chosen a new version of himself, one aligned with his dreams, his potential, and his truth. We all have a version of Daniel inside us. That old self can take many forms: a habit of procrastination, a pattern of toxic relationships, a fear of speaking up, a tendency to overthink and self-sabotage. These patterns are comfortable because we know them, they are familiar. But comfort, no matter how cozy, is the enemy of growth. You may not see it at first, but every time you cling to old habits, you are quietly burying your potential. You are telling your future self, "I am not worthy of change." And yet, the power to rewrite your story is always within reach, if only you dare to confront the truth about yourself. Think about a phoenix, rising from the ashes. Its old body must burn completely before it can be reborn. There is no skipping the fire. There is no taking a shortcut. The death of the old self is the fire that clears the way for something magnificent to emerge. Imagine what it would feel like to step into that fire intentionally, not because life is forcing you to, but because you are choosing to release what no longer serves you. The anxiety, the fear, the limiting beliefs, they must go. Only then can the new self take shape, emerge from the ashes, and soar freely. Consider the story of Maya. She had spent years in a job that drained her soul. She was talented, creative, passionate, but she stayed because of the security it offered. Her old self clung to the safety of a paycheck, even as her spirit cried out for more. One day, she realized that no amount of comfort could replace the joy of living authentically. She made a bold decision. She resigned. Friends and family were skeptical. Fear tried to stop her. But Maya understood that the old Maya, who had stayed out of fear for decades, had to die for the new Maya to rise. She poured herself into her passions, built a business that aligned with her talents, and discovered a life of fulfillment she never thought possible. The old self, the one that clung to comfort and routine, could not live alongside her new self. You see, letting go is not just about action, it's about identity. Who you are today may have been shaped by past circumstances, by upbringing, by trauma, by society's expectations. But who you are meant to become is not limited by any of that. The old self is merely a set of patterns, habits, and beliefs. It has no power except the power you give it. And the moment you choose to release it, to consciously step away from fear and limitation, you unlock the door to a life that aligns with your highest potential. The process may feel uncomfortable. It may feel like grief. Because, in a way, it is. You are grieving the person you used to be. But this grief is not a loss, it is the gateway to liberation. Every fear you release, every limiting belief you discard, every old habit you shed is a step closer to the person you were always meant to become. And when you look back, you may even thank your old self for showing you the way, because without it, you might never have had the courage to rise. So I ask you to look inward, deep into the recesses of your mind and heart. Ask yourself, what parts of me are clinging to the past? Which habits, fears, or self-doubts are holding me back? And most importantly, are you willing to let them go? Are you willing to face the fear of dying to your old self so that you may finally live as the person you were meant to be? The choice is yours, but know this, nothing new can take root while the old self still holds sway. Nothing. The miracle you are waiting for, the life you dream of, the transformation you crave, all of it begins when you have the courage to release the old and embrace the new. Change is never just about taking new actions. It's not about reading one more book, attending one more seminar, or writing down one more goal. True change begins with surrender. Real transformation begins when you admit that you cannot carry your old self into a new life. There is a moment, a fragile, trembling moment, when you must stop struggling against yourself and allow the universe, or life, or your own inner wisdom, to guide you through the fire. And surrender is not weakness. It is courage. It is the act of letting go of the illusion of control so that something far greater can take its place. Imagine a river. You cannot force it to flow uphill. You cannot grab its waters and demand they move according to your schedule. The only way to move with it is to surrender to its current. Many of us fight this natural flow. We clutch our old selves like lifeboats in a storm, afraid that letting go means drowning. But surrender is not drowning. Surrender is floating. Surrender is trusting that the current will take you exactly where you need to go. I remember a woman named Layla. She had spent years trying to control every aspect of her life, her career, her relationships, even her emotions. She wanted to be perfect, to make everyone happy, and to succeed without ever failing. But control is a cage. And one by one, life dismantled all of her walls. She lost her job, a close friendship dissolved, and her carefully built plans fell apart. At first, she resisted. She fought. She tried to rebuild the old structures, to regain control. But nothing worked. And then one night, she sat alone in her apartment, exhausted and broken, and whispered, "I cannot do this anymore." And in that quiet surrender, something extraordinary happened. She let go. She stopped resisting. She released the old Layla, the version that tried to control everything, that feared failure, that clung to appearances. And as she surrendered, doors began to open. Opportunities appeared. Relationships shifted. A new Layla emerged, creative, vibrant, free from the suffocating weight of her old self. Surrender is an act of bravery because it forces you to confront uncertainty. It forces you to face the unknown without the crutch of your familiar patterns. Think about a tightrope walker. They cannot succeed by gripping the rope with fear. They must release tension, balance their body, and trust in their training. Surrender is that balance. It is the art of releasing old fears while maintaining faith in the journey. Consider the story of Ravi, a man who had been working in the same company for 20 years. He was good at his job, respected, and comfortable. But inside, he felt hollow. He longed to start a creative project, to write music, to explore life beyond the predictable routines. Every day, he told himself, "I'll start tomorrow." And every day, the old Ravi, the cautious, risk-averse version, held him back. One morning, after a restless night, he realized that nothing would change until he let go of this fear. So he quit his job, not knowing where the next paycheck would come from. It was terrifying. Friends called him reckless. But surrendering to the unknown became his gateway to freedom. He poured himself into his music, discovered hidden talents, connected with people who inspired him, and found a life far richer than he could have imagined while clinging to the old version of himself. The principle here is simple but profound. You cannot hold on to old limitations and step into your new life at the same time. Fear, doubt, and habit are like baggage. They weigh you down, slow you, and prevent you from rising. Surrender means choosing to release that weight, trusting that life will carry you to where you need to go. And the magic is that, in surrender, you are not powerless, you are powerful in a way that the old self could never imagine. I want you to picture a tree in the middle of a storm. Its branches thrash violently in the wind. The tree could resist, fight the storm, and risk breaking. Or it could surrender, bend with the gusts, and allow the storm to pass. The tree survives not by resisting, but by yielding. Transformation in your life works the same way. The storms of change are inevitable, but surrender allows you to bend, adapt, and rise stronger than before. Even the greatest achievers understand this principle. Athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, they all face moments when they must surrender their old identities. Serena Williams had to let go of the fear of losing to become a champion. J.K. Rowling had to release the doubts that haunted her to bring Harry Potter into the world. Every breakthrough in life requires letting go, even if it feels like stepping into a void. Surrender is not passive. It is not giving up. It is active engagement with life on a higher level. It is choosing to release the old self and trust in the creative power of your own potential. When you surrender, you create space for miracles. You create room for your intuition to speak. You create a doorway for opportunity to enter. But the door cannot open until the old self steps aside. I want you to imagine yourself standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at a vast, unknown landscape below. Fear grips you. You can see the drop. You can feel the wind. You know that stepping off is a risk. But standing there, frozen, clinging to the safety of the cliff, changes nothing. Surrendering to the leap, trusting that you will learn to fly, transforms everything. The old self dies at the edge of the cliff. The new self rises with every daring step. And it doesn't happen overnight. Surrender is a process, a series of small choices that accumulate into transformation. Every time you let go of a fear, every time you release control, every time you stop identifying with the old self, you take another step toward becoming who you are meant to be. It is messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes heartbreaking, but it is the only way forward. Ask yourself right now, are you willing to surrender? Are you willing to release the part of yourself that clings to fear, that doubts, that insists on control? Are you willing to trust in the process of transformation, even when it feels uncertain, even when the path is unclear? Because surrender is not about giving up your dreams, it is about giving up your old self so your dreams can find room to grow. Growth is not only about letting go or surrendering. It is about confronting the past and stepping boldly into the unknown, knowing that the future requires a version of you that does not yet exist. It is the realization that your old habits, your old mindset, and even your old relationships cannot accompany you into the life you are meant to live. Imagine trying to wear shoes that are 2 sizes too small. You might be able to hobble along for a while, but eventually, the pain will stop you. Your old self is those tight shoes. Comfortable in memory, familiar in feel, but ultimately restrictive, painful, and incapable of carrying you to the life you are destined for. Consider the story of Elena. Elena had spent years climbing a corporate ladder she no longer cared about. On paper, she was successful, bonuses, titles, recognition, but inside, she felt hollow. Her heart yearned for creativity, for writing, for something that made her pulse race. But every time she imagined leaving her secure job, a voice whispered, "You'll fail. You can't do it. Stay safe." That voice was the old Elena clinging to comfort, to the known, to fear masquerading as reason. One night, she found herself awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the life she could have. Something inside her shifted. She realized that if she wanted to step into a new version of herself, a bolder, freer, happier self, she had to leave the old one behind. Elena started with small steps. She joined a writing group, began submitting articles, and slowly built a portfolio. Every rejection, every setback, tested her resolve, but she refused to return to the old Elena. The old self, with its fear and complacency, could no longer exist alongside the emerging version of her who was willing to risk, to fail, and to grow. Within 2 years, Elena had published her first book and quit her corporate job entirely. Her old self was not erased completely, it never truly disappears, but she had consciously chosen a path forward that required courage, resilience, and unwavering faith in the potential of the new self. Think about the analogy of a seed. A seed must first die in order to sprout. The hard shell must break. The nutrients stored within must dissolve to fuel new growth. It is a painful process, invisible to the eye, but it is the only way for a tree to emerge, tall and strong. Transformation works the same way. The old self must dissolve in the fertile ground of intention, courage, and action before the new self can rise. The difficulty is that we cling to the seed stage, afraid of breaking, afraid of losing what is familiar. Yet nothing in life grows without this necessary death. There was a man named Jordan who had always dreamed of traveling the world. For years, he told himself he would do it someday. He had responsibilities, bills, and the steady rhythm of his old life. The old Jordan was cautious, risk-averse, comfortable in routine. But the new Jordan, the one who wanted adventure, connection, and freedom, was screaming inside. One day, he bought a one-way ticket and left his job without a safety net. The old Jordan panicked, but the new Jordan thrived. He met strangers who became friends, faced challenges that taught him resilience, and discovered a sense of purpose he never knew existed. The old self could not survive in the same space as the new, it had to die for the transformation to be real. We all face moments like this, moments when the life we want demands a version of ourselves we have not yet become. And here's the challenge. It is often easier to cling to the old self than to embrace uncertainty. It is easier to stay small, to stay safe, to keep playing the part that is familiar. But safety, comfort, and familiarity are illusions when it comes to true growth. True growth demands risk, courage, and the willingness to leave the old behind. Look at an athlete training for the Olympics. Every day, they break down old habits, push through limits, and endure pain. They leave behind the version of themselves that could have settled for mediocrity. They sacrifice sleep, leisure, and old routines to emerge stronger, faster, and more capable. Their old self does not disappear entirely. It lingers, but it no longer dictates their actions. The athlete who wins gold is the one who has mastered the art of leaving the old self behind and embracing the rigorous, uncomfortable path of transformation. Sometimes, leaving the old self behind means confronting uncomfortable truths. Perhaps you have been dishonest with yourself, or fearful, or stuck in patterns of self-sabotage. Acknowledging these truths is not punishment, it is liberation. The moment you face your own limitations without judgment, you create space for the new self to grow. You step out of the shadows of your past and into the light of your potential. And once that step is taken, there is no turning back. The old self has served its purpose. It has taught lessons, offered protection, and carried you to this point. But now it is time to rise above it. Consider the story of Malik, a young entrepreneur who launched a business but failed repeatedly. Every failure chipped away at his confidence, and every setback was a mirror reflecting his old self, the self who feared risk, who avoided criticism, who clung to stability. After a period of despair, Malik made a conscious choice. He would not allow his old self to dictate his future. He analyzed his mistakes, embraced new strategies, sought mentorship, and redefined what success meant to him. Slowly, he built a thriving business. The old Malik, the cautious, fearful version, did not disappear entirely, but it no longer controlled him. He had stepped into a new self, capable, courageous, and unafraid of failure. Growth demands this conscious shedding. Every dream you have, every vision of your ideal life, requires a version of you that is not yet present. And the paradox is that this new self cannot exist while the old self clings tightly to the past. You cannot be free while carrying fear. You cannot be abundant while holding scarcity in your mind. You cannot rise to your potential while clinging to patterns that limit you. I want you to picture a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble. Every strike removes pieces of the old form, revealing the masterpiece hidden inside. The sculptor does not mourn the marble that falls away. Each piece removed is necessary for beauty to emerge. Your old self is the marble being chipped away. Every fear released, every limiting belief discarded, every habit replaced, is a strike of the chisel, shaping the masterpiece of who you are meant to become. Transformation is not linear. There will be setbacks. The old self will try to sneak back in, whispering, "You're not ready. You failed before. Don't risk it." But each time you resist that pull, each time you choose action over fear, you strengthen the new self. It grows resilient, confident, and unstoppable. The more you let the old self dissolve, the more room you create for your true potential to emerge. And so, every time you feel fear, hesitation, or doubt, remember this: it is the old self speaking. It is the part of you that clings to comfort, that resists change, that fears the unknown. To rise, to grow, to transform, you must step beyond it. You must consciously release the old version of yourself and embrace the person you are meant to become, even if that person is still invisible, even if the path is unclear, even if the risk feels unbearable. Because the moment you do, the new self begins to rise, unstoppable, vibrant, and fully alive. Sometimes the most difficult part of transformation is confronting the truth that your past cannot travel with you. Every choice you made, every mistake, every moment of hesitation, every habit that no longer serves you, these are the footprints of your old self. They are memories, experiences, and patterns that have shaped who you are, but they cannot dictate who you are becoming. Imagine trying to climb a mountain while carrying a backpack filled with rocks from the valley below. Every step becomes heavier, every breath more labored. The past, with its fears and regrets, weighs you down. The new self you are striving to become cannot ascend while burdened by what no longer serves you. Let me tell you about Sophia. Sophia had grown up believing that she was not enough. She carried the echoes of criticism, rejection, and comparison from her childhood like a shadow. For years, she let these old beliefs guide her decisions, her relationships, her career. She avoided risk, she doubted her worth, and she played small, quietly settling into a life that never ignited her soul. But inside, Sophia felt a persistent ache, a calling for something more. One day, she realized the truth. If she wanted to step into the life she desired, she could no longer carry the old Sophia, the version who feared, who doubted, who believed she was unworthy. She had to release it. The release wasn't easy. It felt like grieving a part of herself. There were tears, sleepless nights, and moments of panic when she wondered if she was making a mistake. But Sophia knew that transformation requires courage, and courage is born in the crucible of discomfort. She began by confronting the beliefs that had held her back. Every "I can't" became a challenge. Every memory of rejection became a lesson, not a sentence. Every habit that limited her became a stepping stone toward freedom. Slowly, she began to build a new identity, a Sophia who was capable, confident, and alive. This process is not just about letting go of mistakes or failures, it is about releasing the very patterns and habits that define the old self. Consider a garden overrun with weeds. No matter how much sunlight falls or how much water you pour, nothing new can thrive until you pull out the weeds by their roots. Your old self is the weeds, your limiting beliefs, your fears, and your habits. Until you remove them, the seeds of your new life cannot grow. Transformation is not about layering new behaviors over old patterns, it is about clearing the ground so that what is new has room to flourish. I think about a man named Aaron. Aaron was a skilled chef, but he worked in a restaurant that crushed his creativity. Every day, he followed strict menus, rigid rules, and uninspired routines. His talent simmered beneath the surface, but the old Aaron, the one who feared change and clung to stability, kept him trapped. One evening, Aaron watched a documentary about a street food chef traveling the world, creating dishes that told stories, and he felt something ignite inside him. For the first time, he recognized that the old Aaron could not coexist with the chef he was meant to become. He had to release the fear, the comfort, and the doubts. He sold his car, left his apartment, and took a leap into the unknown. The old Aaron tried to pull him back, whispering about failure and risk, but the new Aaron pushed forward. He traveled, cooked, experimented, and learned. He built a name for himself not because he avoided fear, but because he chose to leave the old behind. Think of it like a snake shedding its skin. It cannot grow while clinging to the old layer. The old self, with its limitations, habits, and attachments, is like that skin, protective once, but constraining now. Growth requires a willingness to let go, to embrace the vulnerability of being new, raw, and unshaped by fear. It is in this shedding that we discover our true strength, our creativity, and our potential. Sometimes the past feels safe because it is familiar. You know how to navigate it. You know its patterns. You know its limitations. But comfort is a trap. It whispers lies like, "You'll find the way you are," or "one more day of routine won't hurt." And yet, every day spent clinging to the old self is a day delayed in becoming the person you were meant to be. The moment you release that weight, even in a small way, the path forward becomes clearer, the possibilities brighter, and the courage to rise grows stronger. Consider the story of Naomi. She had always dreamed of speaking in public but had spent years hiding her voice, terrified of judgment. The old Naomi whispered, "Stay quiet, it's safer. You'll embarrass yourself." One day, she attended a workshop that challenged her to speak in front of strangers. Her heart raced, her palms sweated, and the old self screamed to retreat. But she stepped forward anyway. That single act of courage, of releasing the old patterns of fear and self-doubt, opened a door. She continued to speak, grow, and inspire, eventually becoming a respected voice in her field. Naomi's old self didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled her. She had freed herself to rise. The past serves as a teacher, but it is not meant to be a residence. Mistakes, regrets, and fears have lessons to impart, but if you dwell in them, they become chains. Transformation requires you to acknowledge them, learn from them, and then set them aside. Only by releasing the old self, those limiting narratives, old habits, and patterns of thought, can you step fully into the new. The new self demands space, clarity, and courage. And here's the paradox: the more you release, the more empowered you feel. The less you cling, the more freedom you experience. Every fear discarded, every habit replaced, every old story released is a declaration. I am no longer who I was. I am becoming who I am meant to be. And that act of conscious release is not passive. It is the most powerful, deliberate, and courageous step you can take toward your future. So, picture yourself standing on the edge of transformation. Behind you is the comfort of the old self, familiar, but limiting. Ahead lies the unknown, vast, and full of possibility. To rise, you must step forward. To ascend, you must let go. To become, you must release what no longer serves you. The journey is not easy. It may feel like loss, like grief, like fear, but it is also the path to liberation, creativity, and your highest potential. Every person who has truly risen to greatness has walked this path. Every person who has transformed has left the old self behind, sometimes painfully, sometimes reluctantly, but always intentionally. And so, as you move forward in your own life, ask yourself, what old habits, beliefs, or patterns am I still carrying that weigh me down? Which parts of myself must I release to make room for who I am truly meant to become? What courage will I summon today to step beyond the past and rise? Because the old self cannot rise with you. It must fall. And in that fall, your new self finds space to soar, unburdened, vibrant, and alive. True transformation is not about courage alone, it's about commitment. Courage is the spark that gets you started. It's that moment of defiance when you say, I won't accept this anymore. But spark alone cannot sustain the fire of change. Commitment is what fuels the long journey, what keeps you moving forward when fear, doubt, and setbacks threaten to pull you back into the old self. Without commitment, courage flickers and fades. But when courage is paired with unwavering commitment, mountains move, chains break, and the new self rises with unstoppable force. Consider the story of Jason. Jason had always dreamed of becoming a professional musician. From the outside, he seemed brave. He performed in front of friends, shared his songs online. But inside, the old Jason clung to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of inadequacy. One night, after a particularly discouraging open mic, he felt the old self creeping back, whispering, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you should just quit. But something deeper inside him stirred, a quiet voice saying, not yet. Not today. That night, he made a commitment, not a fleeting burst of courage, but a deliberate choice to continue, day after day, to step into his dreams no matter the obstacles. That commitment became his anchor, his guiding light through uncertainty. Commitment transforms struggle into growth. Think about a marathon runner. The initial decision to run a race takes courage, yes. But the real work comes in the months of training, the early mornings, the aching muscles, the days when motivation falters and every fiber of the body and mind resists. It is commitment that carries the runner across the finish line, that allows the dream to become reality. Transformation works the same way. Your old self will resist, it will beg you to give up, to return to comfort. But commitment is what keeps you moving forward, even when the path is steep, rocky, and uncertain. I want you to picture a woman named Leona. Leona had been battling chronic self-doubt for years. Every time she tried to step into a leadership role, the old self whispered, "You're not ready. You'll fail." She could have listened. She could have retreated. But she made a commitment, to herself, not to anyone else, that she would no longer let fear dictate her life. She enrolled in leadership courses, sought mentorship, and started taking risks in small, consistent ways. The old self did not vanish immediately. It still showed up, like an uninvited guest at every opportunity. But Leona's commitment acted as a shield. It allowed her to rise despite fear, to act despite doubt, and to slowly build the confident, capable leader she had always envisioned. Commitment requires consistency. Growth is not a single act of bravery, it is 1,000 small decisions made over time. Every choice to rise above fear, to release old habits, to step forward into the unknown, strengthens the new self. Imagine stacking blocks. Each block is an action, a decision, a choice to honor your transformation. One block alone may wobble and fall. But when stacked consistently, with care and intention, they create a structure strong enough to withstand storms. Your new self is built in the same way, through repeated commitment to growth, even when the old self protests. Even the most extraordinary figures in history relied on commitment, not just courage. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. Each failure could have extinguished his spark, but his commitment to the vision of illumination kept him going. Maya Angelou faced repeated rejections before her first book was published, but her commitment to her voice, her story, and her purpose pushed her forward. Commitment is the bridge between who you are now and who you are meant to become. Sometimes, commitment demands sacrifice. It may mean giving up comfort, convenience, or approval. It may mean enduring criticism, judgment, or temporary failure. But the sacrifices made in service of your transformation are not losses, they are investments in the life you are creating. Imagine a sculptor laboring over a block of stone. Every strike, every chip, every hour of painstaking effort removes the unnecessary and reveals the form within. Commitment is the sculptor's hand. Without it, the masterpiece remains hidden. I think about Daniel and Elena from earlier, the ones who released their old selves to pursue dreams. What made their transformations lasting was not a single act of courage but a sustained commitment. Day after day, they chose the new version of themselves, even when the old self protested. That commitment became the foundation upon which their lives were rebuilt. Without it, courage alone would have faded, and they would have returned to the familiar patterns of fear and limitation. Commitment also transforms doubt into opportunity. When the old self says, "You can't," commitment says, "I will." When fear whispers, "This is too risky," commitment replies, "I will try anyway." When setbacks arise, commitment provides the resilience to rise again. It is the steady drumbeat behind every breakthrough, the unseen force that fuels visible success. And the more deeply you commit to your new self, the less power the old self holds over you. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at a vast unknown. Courage may get you to the edge, but commitment is what carries you forward into flight. Every step you take in alignment with your new self, every choice to honor your transformation, every action against fear strengthens your wings. And as you continue to move forward, day after day, you build momentum, confidence, and clarity. Commitment is also about alignment. Your actions must consistently reflect the person you are becoming. The old self will tempt you to act in old ways, to compromise, to procrastinate, to retreat, but commitment means choosing differently. It means showing up even when motivation is low. It means practicing the habits, behaviors, and mindsets of the person you want to be, even before you fully feel like that person. The more you align your actions with your new identity, the faster the transformation becomes irreversible. I want you to imagine the life you desire. The freedom, the joy, the purpose, the abundance. That life requires more than courage. It demands unwavering commitment to growth, to change, and to the new self you are consciously creating. Every decision, every habit, every moment of resistance overcome strengthens the foundation for that life. Without commitment, the old self will quietly reassert control. With commitment, the old self becomes a distant echo, no longer a barrier to your rise. And so, the next time fear whispers in your ear, or doubt grips your heart, remember, courage is only the beginning. Commitment is what turns the spark into a blazing fire. Commitment is what allows you to release the old self completely and step fully into the new. Every small, deliberate, consistent choice you make is a strike against the chains of the past, a building block for your transformation, and a declaration that the new version of you is not negotiable. True rebirth and personal growth lead to freedom, abundance, and your highest potential, but only if you are willing to walk through the fire of transformation with intention. Many people dream of freedom, imagine abundance, and yearn to become their highest selves, yet few achieve it. Why? Because the path demands that you release the old self entirely. The old patterns, the old beliefs, the old habits, they cling like shadows, whispering, "Stay here. This is safe. This is enough." But nothing extraordinary ever comes from safety or complacency. Freedom demands sacrifice, abundance demands courage, and your highest potential demands that you step fully into the unknown, leaving the old version of yourself behind. Think about a bird in a cage. The bars may feel familiar, even comfortable. Food arrives. Routine is predictable. Fear keeps it from flying into the open sky. And yet, outside those bars lies the vast expanse of the sky, endless opportunity, and the possibility to soar higher than it ever imagined. Transformation is the act of opening the cage door, trusting the wings you've been gifted, and taking flight. The old self may protest, clawing at the bars, fearful of what lies beyond. But the new self, once unleashed, soars freely, discovering a life unimagined while the cage of old habits is left behind forever. Consider the story of Naomi. Naomi had lived her life in the shadow of fear. She avoided challenges, doubted her worth, and clung to a job that offered security but no fulfillment. Every day felt like a repetition of the day before, a life safe, predictable, but empty. One morning, after a conversation with a mentor, Naomi realized that freedom would not come if she continued to live as the old Naomi. The old self had to die. She quit her job, faced the uncertainty of a new career, and invested in personal growth. The journey was painful and full of doubt, but each step forward revealed more of who she was capable of becoming. Today, Naomi runs her own successful business, mentors others, and lives a life rich with creativity and fulfillment. The old self, with its fear and limitation, was shed, and in that shedding, Naomi discovered the freedom and abundance she had always craved. Freedom is not merely external. It is internal. It is the freedom from self-doubt, from limiting beliefs, from patterns that have chained you for years. It is waking up each day and knowing that you have the power to shape your life, not because life guarantees success, but because you have cultivated the strength, clarity, and resilience to pursue it. The old self, the fearful, the hesitant, the constrained, cannot coexist with this level of inner freedom. It must be released entirely. Abundance, too, cannot flourish while the old self persists. Abundance is not just wealth. It is the richness of relationships, experiences, knowledge, and personal fulfillment. It is the awareness that life offers infinite possibilities when you align with your true self. I want you to imagine a garden. Seeds planted in rocky soil will struggle. Seeds planted in fertile, prepared ground will thrive. Your old self is the rocky soil, full of doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs. Your new self is the fertile ground, ready to receive the seeds of abundance. Until you clear away the old, the seeds cannot take root, and the harvest cannot come. Let me tell you about Malik. Malik had always dreamed of becoming a social entrepreneur, creating projects that uplifted his community. Yet he held on to fear, self-doubt, and the old patterns of what is safe and what is certain. He hesitated, postponed, and questioned his own worth. But one day, Malik made a conscious decision. He would no longer let the old self dictate his future. He took a leap of faith, sought mentorship, learned new skills, and committed to action. The transformation was not instantaneous. There were failures, doubts, and moments when the old self tried to reclaim control. Yet Malik persisted. Each step into his new self brought freedom from fear, abundance in opportunities and relationships, and the realization of his highest potential. Today, he runs multiple social initiatives that change lives, proof that letting go of the old self opens the door to a life far greater than imagined. Your highest potential is not a distant dream. It is the version of yourself waiting patiently, growing quietly beneath the surface, until you release the old self and allow it to emerge. Imagine a sculptor chipping away at a massive block of stone. Every chip removes the unnecessary, every strike reveals more of the hidden form. The sculptor cannot simply paint the stone or add layers to it. The masterpiece already exists inside. Transformation works the same way. Your highest potential is already within you. It waits, but the old self must be chipped away, released, surrendered, and transcended, so that the brilliance can shine forth. Think about the metaphor of a phoenix. It is burned to ashes before it rises. The ashes are not the end. They are the prelude to rebirth. The old self is the ash, the residue of past fears, limitations, and outdated beliefs. Only by allowing it to dissolve can you rise anew, stronger, brighter, and ready to soar to heights you never imagined. This process is not optional. It is inevitable if you truly desire transformation. I want you to reflect on your own life for a moment. What old habits, limiting beliefs, or fears are you still carrying? How many opportunities have slipped through your hands because the old self clung stubbornly to comfort and familiarity? And most importantly, are you willing to let go, fully and deliberately, so that your new self can rise unburdened? The universe responds to decisive action. It does not reward hesitation. Freedom, abundance, and your highest potential are waiting. But the doorway opens only when you release what no longer serves you. Even small acts of letting go create ripples of transformation. Every time you confront fear, challenge a limiting belief, or release a habit that holds you back, you expand your capacity for growth. Each act strengthens the new self, reinforces the path toward freedom, and draws abundance closer. Transformation is cumulative. The more you shed the old, the stronger, freer, and more vibrant your new self becomes. Look at your life as a vast, blank canvas. Every choice, every act of courage, every commitment to release the old self is a brushstroke. The painting will not be complete overnight. Some strokes may be messy, some colors may clash. But as you continue to paint with intention, clarity, and courage, the masterpiece of your highest potential begins to emerge. Freedom is the space to paint boldly. Abundance is the richness of color. Your highest potential is the vision revealed in the completed work. And none of it is possible while clinging to the old self. Transformation is not a luxury. It is the law of growth. The old self cannot rise with you. It must fall. And in that fall, you discover a freedom you have never known, an abundance far beyond what you imagined, and a version of yourself that is alive, radiant, and unstoppable. Every person who has achieved greatness, every soul who has lived fully, has walked this path. They chose to release the old and rise. And so, I leave you with this: the life you dream of, the person you are meant to become, the freedom, abundance, and brilliance you seek, all of it awaits on the other side of release. Step boldly. Let go fully. Rise powerfully. Because your old self must die. And when it does, your true self, your magnificent self, finally takes flight. So I ask you now, right here, right this moment, are you ready? Are you ready to let go of the fears, the doubts, the habits that have held you back for far too long? Are you ready to release the old self that whispers, stay small, stay safe, stay ordinary? Because your new self is waiting. Your new life is waiting. Your freedom, your abundance, your highest potential, they are all waiting for you on the other side of fear. And I want you to feel this truth deep in your bones. Transformation does not wait. Opportunity does not knock twice. The moment is now. The choice is yours. Will you cling to the comfort of yesterday, or will you rise into the brilliance of tomorrow? Will you let the old self define you, or will you allow the new self to lead you? Will you watch life pass you by, or will you step boldly into the life you were meant to live? I don't want you to leave here thinking about it tomorrow. I want you to act today. I want you to take that first step, that bold leap, that conscious decision to shed the old self and embrace the new. Feel the fear, but do it anyway. Tremble, but take the step anyway. Hesitate, but move anyway. Because every moment you wait is a moment your potential is being wasted. Every moment you delay is a moment your dreams are slipping away. And when you feel the weight of doubt, remember this: the old self cannot rise with you. The old self will hold you back. The old self will whisper lies. But the new self, the true, magnificent, limitless you, is waiting. Waiting for you to say yes. Waiting for you to step forward. Waiting for you to rise. So rise. Rise above fear. Rise above doubt. Rise above limitation. Rise above the old self. Rise into your freedom. Rise into your abundance. Rise into your highest, most extraordinary potential. And remember this: forever, your old self must die, so your new self can soar. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract success like a magnet, while others struggle, year after year, doing everything right? What if I told you that the secret isn't talent, luck, or even hard work, but a mindset? A mindset that the rich and successful have mastered for centuries. And it all starts with two simple words: think big. Start small. Thinking big is more than dreaming. It's daring to see possibilities that others can't even imagine. Think of Elon Musk. When most people saw the auto industry as set in stone, he imagined electric cars. When people thought space travel was for governments, he saw commercial rockets. Thinking big means giving yourself permission to dream beyond your current reality. But here's the catch: dreaming big alone isn't enough. Many dreamers never take off because they are paralyzed by the enormity of their vision. That's where starting small comes in. The richest people in the world didn't start at the top. They started with small, consistent steps. Warren Buffett didn't buy billions of dollars in stocks at first. He bought a single stock at 11 years old. Amazon didn't begin as the trillion-dollar empire it is today. It was a small online bookstore in a garage. Success isn't about giant leaps. It's about tiny, focused actions that compound over time. Imagine planting a tree. You don't start by expecting a giant oak tomorrow. You plant a seed. You water it. You nurture it. And one day, that seed grows into a magnificent tree that can weather storms, provide shade, and bear fruit. Here's the Florence Scovel Shinn'S secret: the universe responds to clarity. When you clearly see your big vision, and you pair it with small, daily actions, the world starts aligning in your favor. Ask yourself, what one small step can I take today that moves me closer to my big dream? It could be learning a new skill, reaching out to a mentor, or saving a tiny amount of money. Tiny steps are powerful because they build momentum, and momentum is invisible magic that fuels success. Of course, fear will try to stop you. Doubt will whisper, "You're not ready." But remember, the rich don't let fear dictate their steps. They start small even when scared. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb overnight. Thousands of failures taught him one truth: each no was just a step closer to the yes. What if you approached your own challenges that way? What if each small action, no matter how insignificant it feels, is actually paving the path to your big dream? So today, I challenge you, think bigger than you ever dared. See beyond the limits society or your own mind has set. Then, start small. Tiny steps, every day, with relentless consistency. Remember, the richest secret of all isn't money, it's the habit of combining vision with action. Think big. Start small. And watch the magic unfold. Your journey starts today. Will you take the first step? Following are the key points you will listen in this video. Dream boldly. Thinking big opens doors that ordinary visions can't. Start small. Success compounds from tiny, consistent actions. Momentum matters. Small steps build unstoppable energy over time. Daily clarity. Clearly defined goals attract opportunities and resources. Embrace failure. Each setback is a stepping stone, not a dead end. Action conquers fear. Courage is taking small steps even when scared. Have you ever noticed how some people see the world differently, almost as if they are looking through a window into the future while the rest of us are staring at the walls around us? That's the magic of thinking big, the ability to imagine possibilities so vast that they almost feel impossible. It's not about daydreaming while life passes you by, it's about daring to envision a life that most people wouldn't even allow themselves to imagine. Picture a young boy in South Africa, sitting on the steps of a small, crowded home, staring at the night sky. He doesn't just see stars. He sees destinations, possibilities, journeys that have never been taken. That boy grows up to create rockets that leave Earth itself. He's not special because he's smarter than everyone else. He's special because he allowed himself to think beyond the limits everyone else accepted. He dreamed big. Thinking big starts with asking yourself questions that scare you. Questions like, what if I could create something that changes millions of lives? Or what if I could live a life so extraordinary that it inspires others to dream bigger than they ever thought possible? When most people settle for a safe answer, the rich and successful refuse to stay small. They lean into the questions that seem ridiculous, unattainable, or even impossible. They imagine solutions, products, and futures that feel uncomfortable at first, because discomfort is a signal that they are touching something transformative. Imagine standing in a crowded room where everyone is talking about what's likely or realistic. Then imagine one person, quietly, confidently sketching an idea that no one else sees yet. That's the moment thinking big begins. It's the quiet rebellion against limits. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, sitting in a tiny cafe, watching rain trickle down the window, a single mother with barely enough money to pay the rent. She didn't have a mansion, a team of editors, or even a clear path to success. She had a story in her mind about a boy who could do magic. But she didn't just imagine a little story. She imagined a world so detailed, so rich, and so alive that it demanded to exist outside her mind. People might have told her to focus on realistic pursuits, but she saw a possibility that others ignored. She thought big, and that thought alone eventually became a global phenomenon that transformed lives. Thinking big often starts in moments of struggle, when the ordinary options feel insufficient, and the mind reaches for extraordinary solutions. Thinking big is not just imagining riches, fame, or power. It is imagining impact. It is imagining a life where your actions ripple beyond your immediate circumstances, where your ideas can ignite change in others. Imagine the young Steve Jobs in a small garage, not just building a computer, but dreaming of a future where technology would fit seamlessly into people's lives, where devices would be intuitive, beautiful, and personal. He didn't see a product, he saw an experience. He didn't settle for the limitations of the technology available at the time. He imagined a world that had never existed and then began to pull it into reality. The difference between him and someone who never tries is not intelligence, it is the audacity to envision what others cannot yet see. The mind of someone who thinks big operates like a telescope turned toward the stars. It focuses not on the obstacles in front of them, but on the possibilities far beyond. The challenges are there, yes, but they are secondary. When you allow yourself to dream big, obstacles become puzzles, problems become fuel, and the world becomes a playground of opportunity rather than a cage of limitations. Imagine walking down a crowded street, seeing nothing but ordinary shops and dull signs. Now imagine walking the same street but noticing opportunities for cafes, bookstores, or spaces that could serve your community in ways no one else has imagined. Thinking big trains your mind to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary, to see potential where others see the status quo. Think of Florence Scovel Shinn'S words, which remind us that your thoughts are seeds. Your word is your wand, she wrote. Every thought of greatness, every vision you allow to take root, is a seed planted in the soil of your subconscious. Some people plant weeds by doubting themselves. Others plant mighty oaks by daring to dream and insisting that the dream deserves life. The moment you decide to think big, you are choosing to plant an oak, a tree that might grow slowly, but will one day provide shade, fruit, and shelter for countless others. It begins as a thought, invisible, fragile, and easy to dismiss, but that is precisely why it is so powerful. Think big also requires courage. It requires imagining success that terrifies you and persisting when others shake their heads. Imagine a woman in a small apartment, looking at her hands as if they are too ordinary to create anything extraordinary. She dreams of writing a novel, starting a business, or launching an invention. Every fiber of her being whispers that she's not enough, but she imagines anyway. She sketches a plan, writes a paragraph, makes a call. That small act of thinking beyond her immediate circumstances sets into motion a chain of events that the world may one day recognize. Big thinking doesn't mean reckless optimism. It means daring to start with your imagination, believing that the mind has a way of creating reality if given focus, courage, and persistence. Even in business, history is full of examples. Take Airbnb. The founders didn't start by imagining a billion-dollar company. They started with a tiny idea, renting out an air mattress in their living room. But the seed of a bigger vision was always there, a world where anyone could feel at home anywhere. That audacious vision guided every small decision, every iteration, and every risk they took. Without the ability to think big, that seed would have remained an ordinary room for rent, invisible to the world. Thinking big is contagious. When you allow yourself to dream beyond what feels safe, you inspire those around you. People are drawn to visionaries because they sense possibility. Imagine a teacher who sees a struggling student not as someone likely to fail, but as a future innovator, artist, or leader. That vision changes how the teacher teaches, how the student sees themselves, and sometimes even the trajectory of their life. When you think big, you don't just change your life, you ripple change outward. And the beauty of thinking big is that it grows. One bold thought leads to another. One audacious dream sparks a string of visions. When you dare to imagine a life beyond the ordinary, you are opening a door to endless opportunities. The first step is not building a skyscraper or launching a global empire. It's allowing your mind to wander into possibilities that scare and excite you in equal measure. It's whispering to yourself, "What if I could? What if I dared?" And then it's holding that thought with conviction, letting it grow in the quiet corners of your imagination until it demands action. Thinking big is the foundation. It's the spark that lights the fire. It's seeing beyond today's limits to tomorrow's possibilities. It's daring to ask questions that others avoid, imagining answers that others dismiss, and planting seeds that others would never see. It begins in your mind, often in the quietest moments, in cafes, in bedrooms, in garages, in stolen moments when the world believes you are doing ordinary things. But inside, you are sketching the blueprint of extraordinary. Every visionary, every innovator, every person who changed the world started here, thinking big, daring to imagine, refusing to settle for anything less than what could be. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain so high that its peak disappears into the clouds. The summit seems impossible to reach, an intimidating wall that blocks your vision. Most people look at it and turn away, thinking, "I'm not ready. It's too much." But the truth is, every great achievement begins at the bottom, with a single, deliberate step. That's the essence of starting small. The big dream, the mountain you see, is the destination, but the journey begins with one tiny, courageous move. Think about Jeff Bezos in his garage, surrounded by boxes of books, a second-hand computer, and a barely-there business plan. Amazon today feels enormous, unstoppable, a force that touches billions of lives. But it didn't start with a headquarters, a fleet of trucks, or millions in funding. It started with one book sale, a single order shipped with care. Each small, painstaking action was a brick in the foundation of a colossal vision. Bezos didn't leap to the summit. He climbed, step by step, learning with every stumble, adjusting his footing, and trusting the process. Starting small is not a compromise, it's strategy. It's the secret that separates dreamers who remain stuck from doers who create legacies. It's easy to think that progress must be dramatic, immediate, and visible, but real growth is often invisible. Think of a tiny stream cutting through rock over decades. Day after day, drip by drip, the water shapes the stone, carving paths where none existed before. One small act repeated consistently, compounded over time, has the power to reshape your world. Consider a young musician, sitting in a dimly lit room, strumming chords on an old guitar. The dream of performing on the world's biggest stages feels almost ridiculous, almost unattainable. But instead of quitting, they start small, learning one song perfectly, performing at open mic nights, posting a video online. Each tiny step teaches them, grows their confidence, and builds momentum. Eventually, those small steps accumulate, and suddenly, the dream that once felt like a distant star becomes a reality they can reach. Starting small also removes the paralysis that comes from fear. Often, when a goal is massive, the mind resists. The sheer size of it can make us freeze, thinking, I can't do this. I'm not ready. But the rich and successful know that starting small is like whispering to fear, I see you, and I'm moving anyway. They chip away at doubt by acting, even when the steps seem insignificant. Every action, no matter how small, is a victory over hesitation. Every tiny win strengthens belief in the bigger vision. Look at the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. She didn't have $1 billion fortune, investors lined up, or a team of experts. She had an idea, a lot of determination, and very little money. She started by cutting the feet off her pantyhose, testing prototypes in her apartment, and showing them to friends. It was small, humble work, invisible to the world. But it was consistent, intentional, and focused. Each small success brought her closer to a brand that now spans continents. The mountain she climbed was enormous, but she conquered it one step at a time. Even in personal growth, starting small makes the difference. If you want to get healthy, you don't run a marathon on the first day. You start with a walk around the block, a single healthy meal, or a 5-minute meditation. Those small actions, repeated daily, build habits. And habits, like seeds, grow roots deep enough to sustain change long-term. What feels tiny today becomes unstoppable tomorrow. Momentum is the hidden magic of starting small. Picture a snowball rolling down a hill, beginning as a tiny ball in your hand. At first, it barely moves, but as it rolls, it gathers snow, weight, and speed. Soon, it becomes a force that no one can stop. That's what consistent small steps do. They accumulate energy, shape your path, and propel you forward. Even setbacks lose power when momentum carries you. You stumble, you adjust, you keep rolling. Eventually, you find that the mountain doesn't feel quite as impossible as it once did. Starting small also allows for learning without catastrophic failure. Every tiny step is an experiment, a way to gather insight and refine your approach. Imagine trying to build a spaceship by throwing together parts all at once, you'd crash before takeoff. But if you test a small engine, then a small wing, then a small model, you learn, adapt, and improve. The same principle applies to business, relationships, creative pursuits, and personal goals. Small actions are lessons disguised as progress. Think of the story of Airbnb. The founders didn't start with a hotel chain or a massive investment. They began by renting out air mattresses in their apartment to 3 guests. Tiny, humble, almost laughable. But each small step, each positive experience, taught them about customer needs, operations, and growth. Those early, small moves were the invisible scaffolding of the empire they would eventually build. Without starting small, the dream would have remained a distant fantasy. Starting small also teaches patience and discipline. In a world that glorifies instant gratification, the ability to chip away at a goal slowly is rare. It's easy to look at someone else's success and feel discouraged. But what we don't see is the countless tiny steps, the early mornings, the late nights, the small risks, the minor victories that pile up silently over time. Every expert was once a beginner taking their first small, often awkward, step. Every success story is a collection of those seemingly insignificant moments that added up, day after day, into something extraordinary. Even in relationships, starting small makes profound differences. A conversation, a thoughtful message, a small act of kindness, these are the building blocks of trust, connection, and love. No one builds a lifelong bond with a single grand gesture. Bonds are strengthened moment by moment, choice by choice, small step by small step. The principle is universal. Progress, growth, and transformation happen incrementally. Starting small does not mean thinking small. It means respecting the process, honoring the journey, and trusting that every action, no matter how minor it seems, is a ripple that can turn into a wave. It is the bridge between dreams and reality, the quiet engine that carries audacious visions into the tangible world. Each step is a vote for your own potential, a declaration that your dreams are worth the effort, and a promise that you will not be paralyzed by the enormity of your goals. And so, when you feel overwhelmed by the mountain before you, when the peak seems impossibly high, remember, the journey starts with one small, intentional step. Water the seed, move the rock, write the paragraph, make the call, take the walk. Let the momentum build. Let the snowball roll. Let the invisible magic of small, consistent action carry you toward a future that once lived only in your imagination. Fear is the quiet whisper that tells you to stop, to stay small, to settle for what's safe. It creeps in when your dreams are big, when your vision stretches beyond what feels familiar, when the mountain ahead seems too high to climb. Everyone experiences it. The question is not whether fear will appear, it's whether you will let it control you. Imagine a young artist staring at a blank canvas, paintbrush in hand, heart pounding. The vision in their mind is vivid, magnificent, yet their hands tremble. What if it doesn't work? What if the world rejects it? That tremble, that hesitation, is fear. And in that moment, the difference between a dream that stays in the mind and a dream that becomes reality is courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. Think of Thomas Edison. He tried thousands of ways to create the light bulb, each attempt failing, each one seemingly proof that the dream was impossible. Yet he persisted. "I have not failed," he said. "I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Every failed experiment was a conversation with fear, a refusal to let doubt dictate his path. Every small success, every tiny spark of progress, was the reward for acting despite the trembling in his heart. Courage is not grandiose. It is persistent, quiet, and often invisible. Fear feeds on exaggeration. It makes problems look insurmountable, setbacks appear permanent, and the mountain ahead impossible to climb. But when you start, when you take that first small step, fear loses power. Picture a tightrope stretched high above the ground. The first step is terrifying. The wind sways, the height dizzying, the risk real. But the moment your foot lands, the balance shifts. Each subsequent step becomes easier. Momentum, courage, and confidence grow together. Starting small is the antidote to fear because action always reduces the unknown. You can't be paralyzed when you're moving. Consider the story of a young entrepreneur sitting in their tiny apartment with barely enough money to pay the bills. They have an idea, something revolutionary, but the fear is loud. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I lose everything? Most would put the idea aside. But they choose a different path. They start small, making a prototype, testing it with friends, learning from feedback. Each small step is a victory over fear. Each minor success whispers, "You can do this." Soon, the fear that once seemed overwhelming is no longer a wall but a stepping stone. Doubt is often disguised as logic. "You're not ready," it says. "You need more experience. You need more money. You need more connections." But the truth is, there is no perfect moment. The rich and successful have learned that waiting for certainty is waiting forever. They start with what they have, with what they know, and with the courage to learn as they go. They embrace the imperfect first step because it is the only step that brings them closer to the dream. Imagine a writer who never publishes a first draft because it isn't perfect. That draft, imperfect as it may be, is the bridge to mastery. Without it, nothing else is possible. Fear and doubt also teaches. They force you to clarify your vision, to prioritize, and to examine your motivation. Ask yourself, why do I want this? Who will benefit? What will happen if I don't try? These questions turn fear from a barrier into a compass, guiding your actions and strengthening your resolve. Every successful person has faced fear. Every innovator, every leader, every creator has felt the trembling of doubt. The difference is that they acted anyway. They leaned into discomfort, knowing that growth always lies on the other side of fear. Look at Malala Yousafzai, sitting in a classroom in Pakistan, facing threats from forces that wanted to silence her. She could have cowered, she could have hidden, she could have stayed small. But she acted, despite fear, because the vision of education for every child was bigger than the fear that surrounded her. Every speech, every article, every brave step forward was a declaration that courage outweighs doubt. When you act in the presence of fear, you not only move toward your dream, you inspire others to do the same. Fear thrives on exaggeration, but action shrinks it. Think of a swimmer standing at the edge of a cold, churning river. The current looks impossible, the water icy, the path treacherous. Their mind screams to step back. But they dive in anyway. The water is shocking at first, uncomfortable, even painful. But with each stroke, they learn the rhythm, they find the current, they move forward. By the time they reach the other side, the fear that once seemed monstrous is a memory, and the triumph becomes a new standard. Courage is built stroke by stroke, step by step, action by action. Even in everyday life, courage transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. A person who speaks up in a meeting, risking judgment, may spark an idea that changes a company. A parent who confronts a difficult conversation may heal a relationship that was fraying. A student who presents a bold project may open doors that seemed closed. Fear will always whisper, but action, the courage to start, is the force that transforms whispers into echoes of success. Starting small doesn't diminish courage, it amplifies it. Each small act is proof to your own mind that you are capable. Each minor victory becomes a building block, reinforcing confidence, reinforcing the belief that bigger steps are possible. Courage grows like a muscle. You exercise it with every tiny step, and soon, you find yourself capable of feats that once terrified you. Even when the stakes are high, the foundation of small, brave actions carries you forward. And here's the beautiful irony. Fear is often strongest when you are closest to a breakthrough. The mountain looks tallest just before the summit. The resistance feels heaviest when the goal is within reach. This is why starting small matters. It allows you to build resilience and momentum while fear is still loud. By the time the dream is tangible, the courage cultivated through small actions carries you through the hardest moments. Fear no longer paralyzes. It motivates, sharpens, and guides. The rich, the successful, the people who leave legacies, none of them are fearless. They feel doubt. They face uncertainty. They stare at impossible challenges. But they act anyway. They start small, they move forward, and they trust the process. And in doing so, fear loses its power, doubt becomes irrelevant, and the mountain they once feared becomes the stage for their triumph. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract success like a magnet while the rest of us struggle, year after year, doing everything right? What if I told you that the secret isn't talent, luck, or even hard work, but a mindset? A mindset that the rich and successful have mastered for centuries. And it all starts with two simple words: think big. Start small. Have you ever noticed how some people see the world differently, almost as if they are looking through a window into the future while the rest of us are staring at the walls around us? That's the magic of thinking big, the ability to imagine possibilities so vast that they almost feel impossible. It's not about daydreaming while life passes you by, it's about daring to envision a life that most people wouldn't even allow themselves to imagine. Picture a young boy in South Africa, sitting on the steps of a small, crowded home, staring at the night sky. He doesn't just see stars. He sees destinations, possibilities, journeys that have never been taken. That boy grows up to create rockets that leave Earth itself. He's not special because he's smarter than everyone else. He's special because he allowed himself to think beyond the limits everyone else accepted. He dreamed big. Thinking big starts with asking yourself questions that scare you. Questions like, what if I could create something that changes millions of lives? Or what if I could live a life so extraordinary that it inspires others to dream bigger than they ever thought possible? When most people settle for a safe answer, the rich and successful refuse to stay small. They lean into the questions that seem ridiculous, unattainable, or even impossible. They imagine solutions, products, and futures that feel uncomfortable at first, because discomfort is a signal that they are touching something transformative. Imagine standing in a crowded room where everyone is talking about what's likely or realistic. Then imagine one person, quietly, confidently sketching an idea that no one else sees yet. That's the moment thinking big begins. It's the quiet rebellion against limits. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, sitting in a tiny cafe, watching rain trickle down the window, a single mother with barely enough money to pay the rent. She didn't have a mansion, a team of editors, or even a clear path to success. She had a story in her mind about a boy who could do magic. But she didn't just imagine a little story. She imagined a world so detailed, so rich, and so alive that it demanded to exist outside her mind. People might have told her to focus on realistic pursuits, but she saw a possibility that others ignored. She thought big, and that thought alone eventually became a global phenomenon that transformed lives. Thinking big often starts in moments of struggle, when the ordinary options feel insufficient, and the mind reaches for extraordinary solutions. Thinking big is not just imagining riches, fame, or power. It is imagining impact. It is imagining a life where your actions ripple beyond your immediate circumstances, where your ideas can ignite change in others. Imagine the young Steve Jobs in a small garage, not just building a computer, but dreaming of a future where technology would fit seamlessly into people's lives, where devices would be intuitive, beautiful, and personal. He didn't see a product, he saw an experience. He didn't settle for the limitations of the technology available at the time. He imagined a world that had never existed and then began to pull it into reality. The difference between him and someone who never tries is not intelligence, it is the audacity to envision what others cannot yet see. The mind of someone who thinks big operates like a telescope turned toward the stars. It focuses not on the obstacles in front of them, but on the possibilities far beyond. The challenges are there, yes, but they are secondary. When you allow yourself to dream big, obstacles become puzzles, problems become fuel, and the world becomes a playground of opportunity rather than a cage of limitations. Imagine walking down a crowded street, seeing nothing but ordinary shops and dull signs. Now imagine walking the same street but noticing opportunities for cafes, bookstores, or spaces that could serve your community in ways no one else has imagined. Thinking big trains your mind to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary, to see potential where others see the status quo. Think of Florence Scovel Shinn'S words, which remind us that your thoughts are seeds. "Your word is your wand," she wrote. Every thought of greatness, every vision you allow to take root, is a seed planted in the soil of your subconscious. Some people plant weeds by doubting themselves. Others plant mighty oaks by daring to dream and insisting that the dream deserves life. The moment you decide to think big, you are choosing to plant an oak, a tree that might grow slowly, but will one day provide shade, fruit, and shelter for countless others. It begins as a thought, invisible, fragile, and easy to dismiss, but that is precisely why it is so powerful. Think big also requires courage. It requires imagining success that terrifies you and persisting when others shake their heads. Imagine a woman in a small apartment, looking at her hands as if they are too ordinary to create anything extraordinary. She dreams of writing a novel, starting a business, or launching an invention. Every fiber of her being whispers that she's not enough, but she imagines anyway. She sketches a plan, writes a paragraph, makes a call. That small act of thinking beyond her immediate circumstances sets into motion a chain of events that the world may one day recognize. Big thinking doesn't mean reckless optimism. It means daring to start with your imagination, believing that the mind has a way of creating reality if given focus, courage, and persistence. Even in business, history is full of examples. Take Airbnb. The founders didn't start by imagining a billion-dollar company. They started with a tiny idea, renting out an air mattress in their living room. But the seed of a bigger vision was always there, a world where anyone could feel at home anywhere. That audacious vision guided every small decision, every iteration, and every risk they took. Without the ability to think big, that seed would have remained an ordinary room for rent, invisible to the world. Thinking big is contagious. When you allow yourself to dream beyond what feels safe, you inspire those around you. People are drawn to visionaries because they sense possibility. Imagine a teacher who sees a struggling student not as someone likely to fail, but as a future innovator, artist, or leader. That vision changes how the teacher teaches, how the student sees themselves, and sometimes even the trajectory of their life. When you think big, you don't just change your life, you ripple change outward. And the beauty of thinking big is that it grows. One bold thought leads to another. One audacious dream sparks a string of visions. When you dare to imagine a life beyond the ordinary, you are opening a door to endless opportunities. The first step is not building a skyscraper or launching a global empire, it's allowing your mind to wander into possibilities that scare and excite you in equal measure. It's whispering to yourself, "What if I could? What if I dared? And then it's holding that thought with conviction, letting it grow in the quiet corners of your imagination until it demands action. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain so high that its peak disappears into the clouds. The summit seems impossible to reach, an intimidating wall that blocks your vision. Most people look at it and turn away, thinking, I'm not ready. It's too much. But the truth is, every great achievement begins at the bottom, with a single, deliberate step. That's the essence of starting small. The big dream, the mountain you see, is the destination, but the journey begins with one tiny, courageous move. Think about Jeff Bezos in his garage, surrounded by boxes of books, a second-hand computer, and a barely-there business plan. Amazon today feels enormous, unstoppable, a force that touches billions of lives. But it didn't start with a headquarters, a fleet of trucks, or millions in funding. It started with one book sale, a single order shipped with care. Each small, painstaking action was a brick in the foundation of a colossal vision. Bezos didn't leap to the summit. He climbed, step by step, learning with every stumble, adjusting his footing, and trusting the process. Starting small is not a compromise, it's strategy. It's the secret that separates dreamers who remain stuck from doers who create legacies. It's easy to think that progress must be dramatic, immediate, and visible, but real growth is often invisible. Think of a tiny stream cutting through rock over decades. Day after day, drip by drip, the water shapes the stone, carving paths where none existed before. One small act repeated consistently, compounded over time, has the power to reshape your world. Consider a young musician, sitting in a dimly lit room, strumming chords on an old guitar. The dream of performing on the world's biggest stages feels almost ridiculous, almost unattainable. But instead of quitting, they start small, learning one song perfectly, performing at open mic nights, posting a video online. Each tiny step teaches them, grows their confidence, and builds momentum. Eventually, those small steps accumulate, and suddenly, the dream that once felt like a distant star becomes a reality they can reach. Starting small also removes the paralysis that comes from fear. Often, when a goal is massive, the mind resists. The sheer size of it can make us freeze, thinking, I can't do this. I'm not ready. But the rich and successful know that starting small is like whispering to fear, I see you, and I'm moving anyway. They chip away at doubt by acting, even when the steps seem insignificant. Every action, no matter how small, is a victory over hesitation. Every tiny win strengthens belief in the bigger vision. Look at the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. She didn't have $1 billion fortune, investors lined up, or a team of experts. She had an idea, a lot of determination, and very little money. She started by cutting the feet off her pantyhose, testing prototypes in her apartment, and showing them to friends. It was small, humble work, invisible to the world. But it was consistent, intentional, and focused. Each small success brought her closer to a brand that now spans continents. The mountain she climbed was enormous, but she conquered it one step at a time. Even in personal growth, starting small makes the difference. If you want to get healthy, you don't run a marathon on the first day. You start with a walk around the block, a single healthy meal, or a 5-minute meditation. Those small actions, repeated daily, build habits. And habits, like seeds, grow roots deep enough to sustain change long-term. What feels tiny today becomes unstoppable tomorrow. Momentum is the hidden magic of starting small. Picture a snowball rolling down a hill, beginning as a tiny ball in your hand. At first, it barely moves, but as it rolls, it gathers snow, weight, and speed. Soon, it becomes a force that no one can stop. That's what consistent small steps do. They accumulate energy, shape your path, and propel you forward. Even setbacks lose power when momentum carries you. You stumble, you adjust, you keep rolling. Eventually, you find that the mountain doesn't feel quite as impossible as it once did. Fear is the quiet whisper that tells you to stop, to stay small, to settle for what's safe. It creeps in when your dreams are big, when your vision stretches beyond what feels familiar, when the mountain ahead seems too high to climb. Everyone experiences it. The question is not whether fear will appear, it's whether you will let it control you. Imagine a young artist staring at a blank canvas, paintbrush in hand, heart pounding. The vision in their mind is vivid, magnificent, yet their hands tremble. What if it doesn't work? What if the world rejects it? That tremble, that hesitation, is fear. And in that moment, the difference between a dream that stays in the mind and a dream that becomes reality is courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. Think of Thomas Edison. He tried thousands of ways to create the light bulb, each attempt failing, each one seemingly proof that the dream was impossible. Yet he persisted. "I have not failed," he said. "I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Every failed experiment was a conversation with fear, a refusal to let doubt dictate his path. Every small success, every tiny spark of progress, was the reward for acting despite the trembling in his heart. Courage is not grandiose. It is persistent, quiet, and often invisible. Fear feeds on exaggeration. It makes problems look insurmountable, setbacks appear permanent, and the mountain ahead impossible to climb. But when you start, when you take that first small step, fear loses power. Picture a tightrope stretched high above the ground. The first step is terrifying. The wind sways, the height dizzying, the risk real. But the moment your foot lands, the balance shifts. Each subsequent step becomes easier. Momentum, courage, and confidence grow together. Starting small is the antidote to fear because action always reduces the unknown. Consider the story of a young entrepreneur sitting in their tiny apartment with barely enough money to pay the bills. They have an idea, something revolutionary, but the fear is loud. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I lose everything? Most would put the idea aside. But they choose a different path. They start small, making a prototype, testing it with friends, learning from feedback. Each small step is a victory over fear. Each minor success whispers, "You can do this." Soon, the fear that once seemed overwhelming is no longer a wall but a stepping stone. Doubt is often disguised as logic. "You're not ready," it says. "You need more experience. You need more money. You need more connections." But the truth is, there's no perfect moment. The rich and successful have learned that waiting for certainty is waiting forever. They start with what they have, with what they know, and with the courage to learn as they go. They embrace the imperfect first step because it is the only step that brings them closer to the dream. Imagine a writer who never publishes a first draft because it isn't perfect. That draft, imperfect as it may be, is the bridge to mastery. Without it, nothing else is possible. Fear and doubt are also teachers. They force you to clarify your vision, to prioritize, and to examine your motivation. Ask yourself, why do I want this? Who will benefit? What will happen if I don't try? These questions turn fear from a barrier into a compass, guiding your actions and strengthening your resolve. Every successful person has faced fear. Every innovator, every leader, every creator has felt the trembling of doubt. The difference is that they acted anyway. They leaned into discomfort, knowing that growth always lies on the other side of fear. Look at Malala Yousafzai, sitting in a classroom in Pakistan, facing threats from forces that wanted to silence her. She could have cowered, she could have hidden, she could have stayed small. But she acted, despite fear, because the vision of education for every child was bigger than the fear that surrounded her. Every speech, every article, every brave step forward was a declaration that courage outweighs doubt. When you act in the presence of fear, you not only move toward your dream, you inspire others to do the same. Starting small doesn't diminish courage, it amplifies it. Each small act is proof to your own mind that you are capable. Each minor victory becomes a building block, reinforcing confidence, reinforcing the belief that bigger steps are possible. Courage grows like a muscle. You exercise it with every tiny step, and soon, you find yourself capable of feats that once terrified you. Even when the stakes are high, the foundation of small, brave actions carries you forward. And here's the beautiful irony. Fear is often strongest when you are closest to a breakthrough. The mountain looks tallest just before the summit. The resistance feels heaviest when the goal is within reach. This is why starting small matters. It allows you to build resilience and momentum while fear is still loud. By the time the dream is tangible, the courage cultivated through small actions carries you through the hardest moments. Fear no longer paralyzes. It motivates, sharpens, and guides. The rich, the successful, the people who leave legacies, none of them are fearless. They feel doubt. They face uncertainty. They stare at impossible challenges. But they act anyway. They start small, they move forward, and they trust the process. And in doing so, fear loses its power, doubt becomes irrelevant, and the mountain they once feared becomes the stage for their triumph. So today, I challenge you. Think bigger than you ever dared. See beyond the limits society or your own mind has set. Then, start small. Tiny steps, every day, with relentless consistency. And when fear whispers in your ear, act anyway. Each small action, each courageous step, carries you forward toward a future that once lived only in your imagination. Think big. Start small. Act with courage. The mountain is yours to climb. So today, I ask you, will you let your dreams stay in your mind, or will you bring them to life? Will you wait for the perfect moment, or will you take the first small step now? Will you let fear hold you back, or will you act despite it? Think big. Start small. Act now. Think big. Start small. Act now. Every second you wait is a second someone else is moving forward. Every hesitation is a missed opportunity. Every doubt is a choice. Do you let it define you, or do you rise above it? The mountain is high. The journey is long. But every summit starts with a single step. Every legacy starts with a single decision. Every extraordinary life starts with a single act of courage. So I challenge you, dream bigger than you ever have before. Move sooner than you ever thought possible. Trust yourself more than you ever believed you could. And remember, what you do today echoes for the rest of your life. Think big. Start small. Act now. The world is waiting. And so is your future. Because the truth is this, the only thing standing between you and everything you've ever wanted is the choice to take that first step.
You know what's funny? We all say we want to change. But deep down, most of us don't want to let go of the person we are now. We cling to our habits, our fears, even our excuses. Because they feel familiar. And familiar feels safe. But here's the truth. The version of you that's standing here today cannot take you where you want to go tomorrow. Think about a snake. When it outgrows its skin, it doesn't keep stretching it. It sheds it. And yes, it's uncomfortable, vulnerable. But without shedding, it can't grow. We humans? We try to drag our old skin into our new life. We want a fresh chapter, without closing the last one. We want the sunrise, without leaving the night. It doesn't work that way. I remember meeting a man who had been stuck in the same job for 15 years. Every day, he complained about how miserable he was. He said, "One day I'll start my own business." But when I asked, "What's stopping you?" his answer was always the same. "I don't know. I guess I'm just not ready yet." Here's what I learned. He wasn't waiting for the right time. He was waiting for permission to stop being his old self. The self that was afraid to take risks. The self that needed certainty more than freedom. That old self was killing his dream. If you've ever tried to plant a seed in hard, dry soil, you know it won't grow. The old you is that hard soil. You have to break it open, loosen it, make space. So something new can take root. So I have to ask you, what parts of you have to die, for the real you to live? Is it the self-doubt? The fear of judgment? The "I'll start tomorrow" version of you? Because until you bury that old self, you'll keep living the same year over and over. And calling it a life. But here's the beautiful part. The moment you release who you used to be, you create space for who you can be. That's when the shy person finds their voice. That's when the procrastinator becomes unstoppable. That's when the just surviving soul starts thriving. Every new version of you requires a funeral for the old one. So, let the old self die. Say goodbye to the habits that chain you. Lay to rest the beliefs that shrink you. And when you walk away from that grave, don't look back. Because the true you, the one who's been waiting, is ready to live. And in this talk, you're going to discover why you can't step into your future while gripping your past. The uncomfortable truth about shedding your old habits, fears, and beliefs. How comfort can become your biggest prison. The reason growth feels like breaking before it feels like freedom. Why waiting for the right time is the biggest lie we tell ourselves. How letting go of your old self creates space for strength and confidence. And the single moment when real transformation begins. So, stay with me, because once you hear this, you'll never look at change the same way again. Why you can't step into your future while gripping your past. Imagine trying to walk forward while holding onto a heavy chain that's tied to a wall behind you. You might take a few steps, but eventually, the pull from behind stops you. That's exactly what it's like when you try to create a new life while still gripping your past. Every choice, every move, Every dream gets slowed down by the weight of who you used to be. The past feels familiar, and familiarity can trick you into thinking it's safe. But the truth is, it's often the very thing keeping you from stepping into the future you've been imagining. I've seen people carry their past like an old suitcase they refuse to put down. It's filled with regrets, failures, memories, and old versions of themselves they've outgrown. The strange thing is, they know the suitcase is heavy. They even complain about it. But when it comes time to set it down, they grip the handle tighter. Maybe it's because the unknown feels scarier than the pain they've learned to live with. Maybe it's because letting go would mean admitting that chapter of their life is over, and endings, no matter how necessary, can hurt. I once knew a woman named Sarah who dreamed of starting over after a divorce. She talked about moving to a new city, meeting new people, and building a fresh life for herself. But every time an opportunity came, she hesitated. She'd say things like, "What if it doesn't work out? What if I fail again?" She wasn't just afraid of the future, she was still living in her old story. Her decisions were being made by the woman she was 5 years ago, not the woman she could be today. She'd carry around old pictures, old messages, even old habits. Her phone still had the same number she shared with her ex, as if she was leaving a door open to a life she claimed she didn't want anymore. And that's what many of us do. We keep doors open to the past while telling ourselves we're moving on. But how can you truly step into a new chapter if your feet are still planted in the old one? Think about it. A butterfly can't stay in the cocoon and still expect to fly. The transformation happens because it leaves that shell behind. If it tried to hold on to even a small part of the cocoon, its wings wouldn't open fully. We humans are no different. We can't half live in the past and fully live in the future. The two worlds are pulling in opposite directions, and sooner or later, something has to give. But here's the thing, the past doesn't just hold you physically, it shapes the way you think. If your mind is still replaying old mistakes, old relationships, or old failures, then your decisions are still being influenced by them. You might pass on an opportunity because it didn't work last time. You might reject love because people can't be trusted. You might avoid risk because you remember what happened before. And in doing so, you let your history write your future. I remember talking to a man who once said, "I can't move forward because I don't want to forget who I am." But I told him, "You're not forgetting who you are, you're making room for who you're meant to become." There's a difference between honoring your past and living in it. Honoring means you acknowledge it, learn from it, and keep the lessons. Living in it means you replay it over and over like an old movie, even though you already know the ending. And the danger with replaying it too much is that you start to believe that's the only story you'll ever have. You stop expecting surprises. You stop believing change is possible. You stop seeing yourself as someone who can become more. Imagine you're on a train, and every station is an opportunity. A new job, a new relationship, a new habit, a new adventure. But you keep stepping off the train at the station called yesterday. The scenery never changes, the conversations stay the same, and your world stays small. The train to the future keeps moving, but you're not on it. Why? Because your comfort zone is built from the bricks of your past. And tearing it down feels like tearing down your identity. But here's the truth, your identity is not your history. Your identity is your potential. Your future self is waiting for you at a place your past self has never been. Sometimes we grip the past because it gives us excuses. If we tell ourselves, "I've always been this way," or "this always happens to me," then we don't have to take the risk of trying again. It's safer to be predictable than to step into the unknown. But the unknown is where your future lives. The unknown is where growth happens. As the author John C. Maxwell once said, "Change is inevitable, but growth is optional." You can't grow if you refuse to release the parts of you that belong to an earlier version of your life. The past can be a teacher, but if you let it, it can also be a prison. And many of us unknowingly choose the prison because at least we know its walls. The truth is, your past will never stop calling you. Old memories will come up. Old habits will try to sneak back in. Old voices will whisper, "Remember when?" And when they do, you'll have a choice, to answer the call or to keep walking forward. Every time you choose forward, you loosen the grip. Every time you choose forward, the chain gets lighter. Every time you choose forward, you take another step toward becoming the version of you that's been waiting all along. It's not about erasing where you came from. It's about deciding that where you came from is not where you're staying. The uncomfortable truth about shedding your old habits, fears, and beliefs. Letting go of old habits, fears, and beliefs sounds simple when we say it out loud. We treat it like cleaning out a closet, just toss out what doesn't serve you anymore. But in reality, it's nothing like that. Old habits are tied to our identity. Fears are wired into our survival instincts. Beliefs are stitched into the fabric of how we see the world. Removing them isn't a tidy process. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes, it even feels like losing a part of yourself. That's why so many people talk about change but never truly go through with it. They underestimate the emotional cost. They want the transformation without the discomfort, the results without the release. But the truth is, change often feels like breaking before it feels like growing. I once met a man named David who wanted to quit smoking. On the surface, it was just a bad habit. But the more we talked, the more I realized smoking wasn't just something he did, it was part of who he thought he was. His friends knew him as the guy who always has a cigarette. Stressful day? Light up. Celebrating something? Light up. Bored? Light up. It was his comfort, his reward, his coping mechanism. Quitting wasn't just about stopping a behavior, it was about rewriting his identity. And that's where the discomfort comes in. When you let go of something you've leaned on for years, you're suddenly standing without your crutch. It's shaky, it's awkward, and your mind tries to convince you to go back because the old way felt stable, even if it was slowly hurting you. Fears work the same way. We think of fear as something to push through, but many fears are deeply ingrained. Some of them come from experiences we had years ago, maybe even in childhood. If you grew up hearing "don't take risks, you'll fail," that warning becomes a protective shield you carry into adulthood. It's heavy, but it feels like it's keeping you safe. The day you try to put it down, everything inside you screams that you're making a mistake. That's why letting go of fear isn't just about courage, it's about learning to live without a shield you've had your whole life. At first, you feel exposed, vulnerable, almost naked in the world. But only when you get past that stage can you realize you're lighter and freer without it. And then there are beliefs, the hardest of all to release. Beliefs are invisible walls that define the space we think we can move in. If you believe you're not good enough, you'll never try for more. If you believe money is evil, you'll sabotage your own success. If you believe people can't be trusted, you'll never build deep relationships. Challenging these beliefs feels like tearing down the walls of a house you've lived in for decades. It's unsettling because those walls made you feel secure, even though they also kept you trapped. Many people would rather stay in a small, safe house than step into the wide, uncertain open. But that's the trade. You can have security or you can have growth, but rarely both. I think of it like pruning a tree. When you cut away branches, it looks harsh. You're taking away parts of something that's been growing for years. The tree doesn't look better immediately. In fact, it can look worse. But pruning is necessary for healthier growth. Old habits, fears, and beliefs are those overgrown branches. Cutting them back might leave you feeling bad for a while, but it creates space for something stronger and more vibrant to grow. The uncomfortable truth is that shedding them will never feel easy in the moment. You'll question yourself. You'll grieve the loss of something that was once a part of you. You might even feel like you're standing in the ruins of your old self. But in that empty space, in that raw and vulnerable place, something new begins to take shape. And that something is the version of you that's been waiting for the chance to finally live. How comfort can become your biggest prison. Comfort has a way of disguising itself as happiness. It feels warm, predictable, and safe, like a favorite blanket you've had for years. You wrap yourself in it and tell yourself, this is enough. And for a while, it is. But comfort has a hidden cost. It keeps you exactly where you are. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't stretch you. It doesn't demand you grow. It quietly convinces you that you don't need to move, and before you know it, what once felt like safety has become a cage. The bars aren't made of steel, they are made of routines, familiar faces, predictable days, and the absence of risk. You don't see them at first because they are comfortable. But that's exactly what makes them dangerous. I remember a guy named Liam who had been in the same job for over a decade. He didn't hate it, but he didn't love it either. It was fine. He knew the work inside out. He knew exactly how much his paycheck would be. He knew what time his lunch break was every day. No surprises. No challenges. And no growth. Every now and then, he'd get an idea about starting his own business or going after a promotion somewhere else, but then he'd tell himself, why rock the boat? I'm doing okay. That's comfort talking, the quiet voice that sounds reasonable but is actually stealing years of your life without you noticing. Liam wasn't stuck because he lacked skill or opportunity. He was stuck because comfort had wrapped itself around him so tightly that the thought of change felt more terrifying than the thought of staying the same. Comfort tricks you by making discomfort look like danger. You start to believe that if something feels scary or uncertain, it must be wrong. But in truth, almost everything worth having in life comes with discomfort at the start. Learning a new skill, meeting new people, moving to a new place, starting a business, ending a toxic relationship. The fear you feel in those moments isn't a warning to stop, it's a sign you're crossing into territory where growth lives. The problem is, if you've been in your comfort zone too long, even small risks feel massive. You've built your entire reality inside 4 invisible walls, and stepping beyond them feels like stepping off a cliff. That's why so many people never leave. They mistake the absence of fear for peace, when really it's just stagnation. It's like sitting in a warm bath. At first, it feels amazing. You relax. You let go. But if you stay in too long, the water cools, your skin wrinkles, and you start to feel heavy and sluggish. Comfort zones are the same. They start out soothing, but stay too long and they become draining, even harmful. The worst part? They make you forget that there's a whole world outside. You stop dreaming big because your reality shrinks to fit the size of what you already know. You trade possibility for predictability. You accept good enough instead of chasing great. I think of Nelson Mandela's words, there is no passion to be found in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. Comfort makes settling feel easy, almost logical. It whispers, don't take the risk. Don't make the change. Just stay here. And in listening to it, you slowly build a prison without realizing you're both the prisoner and the warden. The door isn't locked, but you've convinced yourself there's no point in leaving. The day you step beyond that door will feel terrifying at first. Your heart will race, your mind will question, and part of you will want to run back to what's familiar. But every step you take outside that prison, the world will expand. And you'll wonder why you ever let comfort keep you so small. The reason growth feels like breaking before it feels like freedom. Growth has a strange way of arriving in our lives. It doesn't come wrapped in a shiny box with a bow on top. It doesn't announce itself with a trumpet or knock politely on the door. Most of the time, growth shows up disguised as pain. It feels like breaking before it feels like freedom, and that's the part most people don't talk about. We love the idea of becoming stronger, wiser, more confident, but when we're in the middle of it, it can feel like our whole world is falling apart. That's because growth is not just about adding something new to your life, it's about dismantling parts of yourself that can't come with you to the next chapter. And dismantling hurts. I once spoke with a woman named Clay who left a toxic relationship after 10 years. Everyone told her she was brave. Everyone said she'd feel liberated. And she did, eventually. But in the beginning, she didn't feel free at all. She felt empty. Lost. She would walk into the quiet of her apartment and feel the ache of absence. Even though that relationship was suffocating her, it was familiar. Letting go meant losing not only a person but a rhythm, a routine, a version of herself she had known for a decade. I thought leaving would feel like flying, she told me. But it felt like I'd cut off a part of myself. That's the thing, when you break away from something that has shaped you, even if it's been hurting you, there's grief involved. Growth demands that you give up comfort, and comfort, no matter how unhealthy, becomes a part of your identity. So when it's stripped away, your mind fights it. It whispers, go back. This is too much. You're not ready. That's why people retreat to old patterns, even after they've promised themselves they'd change. They confuse the discomfort of growth with the idea that something is wrong, when in reality, it's a sign they are on the right path. Think about a seed. Before it becomes a plant, it has to crack open. From the outside, that cracking looks like destruction. The smooth shell is broken, split, torn apart. But without that break, there's no sprout. There's no new life. You and I go through the same process. The breaking moments, the heartbreaks, the failures, the moments of uncertainty, are cracks in the shell of who we've been. And only through those cracks can the next version of us emerge. I went through this myself when I left my first business. I had poured years of my life into it, my energy, my creativity, my pride. And when it failed, it felt like I had failed. I remember lying awake at night thinking, who am I without this? The loss was like tearing down a house I had lived in for years, brick by brick, without knowing where I would sleep next. Friends tried to reassure me that something better was coming, but in the middle of that uncertainty, those words felt hollow. What I didn't know at the time was that the breaking I was experiencing was making room for something bigger. The pain was proof that I was letting go of something too small for the person I was becoming. We don't talk enough about the in-between, the gap between letting go of the old and stepping fully into the new. That gap can feel unbearable because it's full of unknowns. Your old habits, your old circles, your old identity, they're gone. But the new ones haven't fully formed yet. You're in transition, and transitions are messy. It's like being on a bridge in the middle of a storm, with no way to see the other side clearly. And here's the catch, you can't run across the bridge just to get it over with. Growth has its own pace. You have to walk through the breaking, even when you want to sprint to the finish. Some people call this the dark night of the soul. It's that period where you feel stripped bare, where everything you've been clinging to slips from your hands. And the strange, almost cruel part is that from the outside, it can look like you're falling apart. People may not understand why you seem distant, why you're questioning everything, why you're not yourself. But the truth is, you are becoming yourself. The real you is emerging, but first the old layers have to be shed, and shedding is rarely graceful. I think about the process of breaking in a pair of new shoes. At first, they pinch, they rub, they give you blisters. You might even think, these don't fit. I made a mistake. But over time, as you keep walking, they start to mold to your shape. The discomfort fades, and suddenly they feel like they were made for you. Growth is like that. At first, it doesn't feel like it fits. It feels awkward, painful, and foreign. But if you keep walking through the discomfort, one day you wake up and realize, you've grown into it. There's also another reason growth feels like breaking. It exposes the truth. When you start changing, you can't hide behind the same excuses anymore. You see the people, places, and habits that have been holding you back. And sometimes, you have to let go of relationships or routines you thought you'd keep forever. That's hard. It can feel like betrayal, but in reality, it's alignment. You're choosing the life you want over the life you've outgrown. And not everyone will applaud you for that. Some will try to pull you back into the old patterns because it's more comfortable for them if you stay the same. Part of the breaking is realizing not everyone can come with you to your next level. And here's the paradox. The very things that feel like they're breaking you are often the things setting you free. Clay's loneliness after her breakup? That space became the soil for new friendships, passions, and a version of herself she never would have met otherwise. My business failure? It forced me to see that I had been aiming too small and clinging to an identity that no longer fit. Without the loss, I never would have made the leap into the work I truly love today. But you don't see the freedom while you're still breaking. You only see the pieces of the life you thought you needed lying on the ground. That's why patience is so critical. You have to trust that the breaking is not the end of your story, it's the start of a better one. The seed doesn't know it's about to become a plant. It just knows it's splitting apart. You don't always know where your growth is leading, but you have to keep going anyway. The day will come when you look back and realize the breaking was the most important thing that ever happened to you. Because without it, you'd still be living inside the shell of your old self, safe, maybe, but small. And the freedom you've been dreaming about? It was waiting for you all along, on the other side of that break. The reason growth feels like breaking before it feels like freedom. Growth rarely arrives the way we imagine it. We picture it as this uplifting, exciting moment where we finally step into the best version of ourselves. We imagine smiles, lightness, and the sweet taste of victory. But in reality, it often starts with tears, with confusion, with the heavy ache of loss. Because before growth can give you freedom, it has to take something from you, the pieces of your life, your habits, your identity, that cannot survive in the place you're headed. And losing those pieces can feel like breaking. I knew a man named Jordan who had spent years building a career that looked perfect on paper. He had the salary, the office, the respect. But deep down, he hated it. One day, He made the decision to walk away and start something new. You'd think that choice would feel liberating, and in a way, it did. But the first weeks were brutal. He told me, "I feel like I've ripped out the floor from under me." The routine that once trapped him had also held him together. Without it, he felt exposed, unstable, and uncertain. And that's what no one tells you. Even when you leave something that's been hurting you, part of you will still mourn it. Growth demands you shed your old skin, and shedding doesn't happen gently. Think of a caterpillar in a cocoon. We romanticize the butterfly's beauty, but we forget that inside that cocoon, the caterpillar completely dissolves. It doesn't just grow wings, it breaks down into something unrecognizable before it becomes whole again. We go through the same process. In order to become who we're meant to be, parts of who we've been must dissolve. And while you're in that stage, it feels like chaos, not creation. For me, it happened when I left a long-term relationship. I thought the moment I walked away, I'd feel lighter, but instead I felt hollow. My days felt strange without the rhythm I'd known for years. Even though the relationship had been limiting my growth, it had given me a sense of certainty, and certainty, no matter how unhealthy, is hard to give up. I learned that the first stage of growth often feels like loss, not gain. It's a quiet kind of grief. The breaking happens because growth forces you into the unknown. The patterns, habits, and people you've leaned on may not fit where you're going. And when you let them go, you're left with an empty space that hasn't yet been filled. It's like standing in the middle of a bridge, unable to see the shore you're walking toward. Every instinct in you screams to run back to the safety of the starting point. But growth asks you to keep moving forward even when you can't see the other side. The mind doesn't like this. The mind craves the familiar. That's why so many people mistake the pain of transformation for a sign that something is wrong. They think, if I'm growing, shouldn't I feel better? But think about building muscle. The process literally involves tearing your muscle fibers so they can repair stronger. The tearing hurts. But without it, there's no strength gained. Growth works the same way. The breaking is not a sign you're failing, it's the proof you're changing. And here's something even more difficult. Sometimes, the breaking involves people. As you grow, you may find that certain relationships no longer align with the person you're becoming. You might outgrow conversations that once felt exciting. You might feel a distance between yourself and people who once felt like home. Letting go of them, or even just accepting the change, can feel like betrayal. But the truth is, not everyone can walk with you into your next chapter. Some were only meant to be part of the earlier pages of your story. It's the same with beliefs. You may realize that some of your deepest convictions, about yourself, about success, about love, were never really yours to begin with. They came from your upbringing, your culture, your past experiences. And when growth calls you to challenge them, it can feel like tearing down the walls of a house you've lived in for years. Those walls kept you safe, but they also kept you small. Without them, the world feels overwhelming at first. But only without them can you expand into something greater. The truth is, the breaking phase is the most misunderstood part of growth. We think of it as the enemy, when really, it's the midwife. It's the part of the process that delivers you into the next version of yourself. You can't get there without it. And the more you fight it, by clinging to old patterns, by rushing the process, by pretending you're okay when you're not, the longer it takes. I remember hearing someone say, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." That's exactly what the breaking feels like, a dark, uncertain place you'd rather avoid. But when you face it, when you sit in the discomfort instead of running from it, something remarkable happens. The fear starts to shrink. The unknown becomes less threatening. And slowly, you begin to see the outlines of the freedom that's been waiting for you. Claire, a friend of mine, once described her own growth journey after leaving a job she despised. "At first, I felt like a vase that had been shattered. But piece by piece, I started putting myself back together, this time in a shape I actually wanted." That's the gift of breaking. It gives you the chance to rebuild intentionally. To choose what stays. To choose what goes. To choose who you want to be moving forward. The hard truth is, the freedom you crave isn't found in avoiding the breaking, it's found on the other side of it. But to get there, you have to be willing to let yourself fall apart a little. You have to trust that the discomfort is temporary, but the transformation will be permanent. You have to remember that every broken shell makes way for a new beginning. One day, You'll look back and realize that the breaking wasn't the end of you, it was the beginning. And in that moment, you'll finally understand why it had to hurt before it could heal, why it had to dismantle before it could rebuild, and why it had to feel like breaking before it could ever feel like freedom. Why waiting for the right time is the biggest lie we tell ourselves. We love the idea of the right time. It feels logical. It feels mature. It feels like patience. We tell ourselves, I'll start when I'm ready. When things calm down. When I have more money, more confidence, more clarity. It sounds reasonable, but here's the truth. Waiting for the right time is one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. Because deep down, it's rarely about timing, it's about fear. Fear disguised as strategy. Fear wearing the mask of preparation. I once met a man named Ethan who dreamed of writing a book. He'd talk about it every year at New Year's gatherings. This is the year, he'd say. But every year, there was a reason he hadn't started yet. Too busy with work. Waiting for inspiration. Not sure if the market was right. On the surface, it looked like he was being cautious and thoughtful. But years went by, and the book was still in his head instead of in the world. What he didn't realize was that there was never going to be a magical morning when all the lights turned green and everything in his life was perfectly aligned for him to start. That day doesn't come. The right time is a myth because life doesn't stop being messy. Bills still come. Emergencies still happen. Your schedule will always be full. Your doubts will always whisper in your ear. If you're waiting for perfect conditions, you'll be waiting forever. As author Hugh Laurie once said, it's a terrible thing, I think, in life to wait until you're ready. I have this feeling now that actually, no one is ever ready to do anything. The truth is, most of us use the idea of the right time as a hiding place. It gives us permission to stay where we are while pretending we're planning for something greater. It feels better to say, I'm not ready yet than to admit, I'm scared to fail. But that fear doesn't disappear with time, it grows. The longer you wait, the heavier the leap feels. Think about a rocket. It doesn't wait for perfect weather to launch. If it did, it might never leave the ground. Engineers pick a window. Conditions may not be flawless, but they are good enough, and they launch anyway. Why? Because they know that once it's moving, adjustments can be made mid-flight. Your dreams work the same way. You don't need perfect clarity to begin, you just need to start moving. Momentum will teach you more than waiting ever will. I remember when I started my first business. I kept telling myself I'd launch when I had more savings. When I'd learned just a little bit more. When I had a perfect plan. But that list kept growing. There was always another thing I needed before I could start. One day, a mentor looked me in the eye and said, if you wait until you're ready, you'll still be here in 5 years, talking about the same idea. That hit me hard. I realized I was waiting for fear to vanish before taking action, not understanding that action is what dissolves fear. And here's the kicker, the right time never announces itself. You don't wake up one morning with a flashing sign that says, now. This is it. In fact, when the moment to start arrives, it often feels inconvenient. It arrives in the middle of chaos. It arrives when your hands are already full. That's because opportunities don't care about your calendar, they care about your willingness. There's another danger to waiting. Life changes faster than you think. That thing you're dreaming about? It has an expiration date. Not because it will stop being possible, but because you will change. Your energy will shift. Your priorities will rearrange themselves. And the version of you who has that specific fire inside might not be around forever. Every day you wait, you risk losing the spark that made you want it in the first place. I think of a woman I knew, Marissa, who always wanted to travel. She had maps on her walls, Pinterest boards of dream destinations, travel blogs bookmarked. But she kept saying, when the kids are grown, when the house is paid off, when I retire. By the time she was financially ready, her health made it difficult to walk long distances, let alone climb mountains or explore cities on foot. She still traveled, but she admitted to me once, I wish I hadn't waited so long. I thought I was being smart, but really, I was just postponing my life. The idea of the right time seduces us because it feels safe. It's a soft, comfortable delay. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Starting before you feel ready is where the magic happens. That's where resilience is built. That's where you learn, adapt, and discover things you never could have from the safety of planning. Starting doesn't mean you throw caution to the wind. It means you stop letting the pursuit of perfect conditions become your excuse. You prepare as best you can with what you have, and then you leap. You embrace the mess, the uncertainty, the inevitable mistakes, because those are not signs of failure, they are signs that you're in motion. I once heard someone describe waiting for the right time like waiting for a wave to stop moving before you jump in. If you stand on the shore waiting for the water to become perfectly still, you'll be there forever. But if you dive in while it's moving, yes, it's a little chaotic at first, but you find your rhythm, and before you know it, you're swimming. The same goes for every big dream, every major life change, every leap you want to take. The right time is not a date on the calendar, it's a decision. It's the moment you choose to stop postponing and start participating. And the moment you do, you'll realize that the conditions you thought you needed weren't necessary at all. They were just a story your fear told you to keep you still. So if you're telling yourself you'll start when things are better or when you're ready, I'll tell you what no one told me. There is no better time than the messy, imperfect, inconvenient now. Because now is all you ever really have. And the people who build the lives they want aren't the ones who waited for the right time. They're the ones who started while it still felt wrong, and discovered along the way that it was exactly right. How letting go of your old self creates space for strength and confidence. Letting go of your old self isn't a gentle, graceful act, it's a shedding. And shedding always feels strange at first, because it means stepping out of a version of you that's been with you for years, maybe decades. That old self might have been shaped by survival, by habits you learned young, by fears you carried quietly. It might even have been the part of you that kept you safe through some of the hardest chapters of your life. But here's the thing, what once protected you can eventually start to confine you. We like to think that strength and confidence come from adding things, new skills, new knowledge, new habits. But just as often, they come from subtraction. They come from clearing out the patterns, beliefs, and identities that no longer serve who you're becoming. Imagine a closet packed so tightly that you can barely fit another hanger inside. It doesn't matter how many beautiful new clothes you buy, if you don't make space, nothing new can truly live there. Your life works the same way. I knew a woman named Lila who had spent years telling herself she was shy. As a child, that belief kept her safe from attention she didn't want. As a teenager, it gave her a reason to avoid social risks. But in her 30s, she realized that label, shy, wasn't truth anymore, it was a story she had outgrown but never stopped telling. And as long as she clung to it, she carried herself small, spoke softly, and stepped back when she wanted to step forward. Letting go of that old identity wasn't about suddenly becoming extroverted, it was about no longer letting a past version of herself write the rules for her present. When you release the old self, you're not abandoning who you are, you're simply choosing to stop dragging outdated baggage into your future. It's like a snake shedding its skin. The old skin isn't bad, it served its purpose. But if the snake doesn't release it, it can't grow. And growth is exactly what creates strength and confidence, because both require space to breathe. Of course, letting go is uncomfortable. It's disorienting to wake up and realize you're no longer the person who reacts with anger to criticism, or the person who avoids eye contact in meetings, or the person who says yes to everything just to avoid conflict. There's an odd in-between phase where you're not quite the old you, but you're not yet the new you either. This is where doubt tries to creep in. You'll wonder if you're losing yourself. But you're not. You're finding yourself beneath the layers you've been carrying. Strength doesn't show up fully formed, it grows in the space left behind when fear or insecurity moves out. Think of it like clearing a garden of weeds. At first, it just looks empty and bare. But over time, with sunlight and water, something healthier takes root. The same is true for confidence. When you let go of the part of you that second-guessed every decision, you create space for self-trust to take its place. When you release the part of you that needed everyone's approval, you create space for self-assurance to bloom. I remember when I had to let go of the people-pleaser version of myself. For years, I thought my value came from making others happy, from never rocking the boat. It was exhausting. Every decision ran through the filter of what will they think? But there came a moment where I realized I was living a life I didn't even choose. It was a life built from the preferences and expectations of others. Letting go meant risking disapproval. It meant saying no more often. It meant losing some relationships that were built on the old, compliant version of me. But the space that opened up was priceless. It filled with energy, authenticity, and a quiet kind of strength I had never felt before. And here's the unexpected part. Letting go of the old you often reveals abilities you didn't even know you had. When you stop telling yourself you're bad with money, you might discover you have a natural talent for managing it. When you release the identity of "I'm not a leader," you might step into situations where people instinctively look to you for guidance. Strength and confidence don't just appear out of nowhere, they've been there all along, but the old self was crowding them out. The hardest part is trusting the gap, the period between who you were and who you're becoming. It feels uncertain because the old habits are familiar, even if they are not healthy. It's tempting to slip back into them just for the comfort of the known. But if you can hold steady in that space, resisting the urge to fill it too quickly, you'll watch yourself transform. You'll see that strength isn't about being unshakable from the start, it's about learning that you can bend without breaking. And confidence isn't about always knowing what to do, it's about trusting yourself enough to figure it out as you go. Sometimes, people around you will resist your changes. They might say, "You've changed," like it's a bad thing. That's because your old self was part of the script they were comfortable with. But you're not here to keep playing a role that no longer fits. And if they can't adapt to the new you, that's part of the shedding, too. Every time you let go of an old piece of yourself, you step into a little more freedom. And freedom is the foundation of both strength and confidence. It's not about becoming someone entirely different, it's about becoming more of yourself. The self that's lighter, stronger, and unafraid to take up space. And while the act of letting go might feel like loss at first, what fills the space will make you wonder why you carried that old version of yourself for so long. Because the truth is, the new space isn't empty, it's an open door. And what walks through that door is the strongest, most confident version of you that's been waiting patiently for the room to finally breathe. And the single moment when real transformation begins. Real transformation doesn't creep in quietly. It doesn't politely knock on your door and wait to be invited. It comes in a single, piercing moment that slices through the noise of your life and whispers, "No," demands, "This is it. No more." Sometimes, that moment arrives softly, like a whisper you almost miss. You're sitting in your car after another exhausting day at a job you secretly resent, staring at the steering wheel, and something inside you breaks, not in a way that destroys you, but in a way that cracks open the truth. Or maybe you're in the middle of a conversation, smiling and nodding like you always do, when a sudden wave of clarity washes over you. "I can't keep living like this." Other times, that moment comes like a storm. A breakup that strips away the comfort you were clinging to. A health scare that makes you realize your time isn't infinite. A sudden loss that rips the blinders from your eyes and forces you to see what really matters. It's not always gentle, and it's rarely convenient, but it is always, always, the start of something irreversible. That single moment is when the excuses die. Not because they suddenly stop being available, but because you no longer believe them. You've told yourself for years that you'll start when the timing is better, or when you have more money, or when you feel ready. But in that instant, you see those words for what they are, a shield you've been hiding behind. And when the shield drops, you feel both naked and free. It's a strange kind of clarity, because nothing external may have changed yet. The bills are still there. The job still demands your time. The people around you are still playing by the same rules. But you are no longer the same. Something inside has shifted so deeply that going back is no longer an option. I remember hearing a man talk about the day he quit drinking. He said it wasn't his worst night, but it was the night he finally looked in the mirror and saw his own eyes staring back at him, not the tired, hollow eyes of someone surviving, but the eyes of someone who suddenly remembered who he was meant to be. That was the moment. No applause, no ceremony, just an inner click that told him, from here on out, everything changes. These moments are often born from pain, but they can also come from love, from awe, from an overwhelming sense that life has more for you than what you've been settling for. You might be standing on a mountaintop at sunrise, feeling so small and yet so infinite, and realize you've been living at half your capacity. Or you might be holding your newborn child and swear silently to become the version of yourself they can look up to. The power of that moment is not in its drama, it's in its decision. Transformation doesn't truly begin when you read another self-help book or make another vision board. It begins when you decide, completely, without loopholes, that the old way ends now. Even if you don't have all the answers. Even if you're terrified. Even if nothing around you supports the choice yet. And the funny thing? That decision can be made in less than a second. It's the point where your inner voice, the one you've been ignoring, becomes louder than your fear. You can feel it in your body, like your chest has more room, like your spine suddenly straightens, like the air feels different. It's not that life instantly becomes easy, but from that moment on, your compass is set. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. Many people miss that moment. They feel it, and then they smother it with distractions. They tell themselves it was just a mood, just a thought, just a passing feeling. They bury it under routine, hoping it'll come back later when it's more convenient. But that moment isn't patient. It's an open door that won't stay open forever. If you've ever had one of those moments, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The sudden awareness. The way the noise of life fades for just a breath. The way your excuses feel flimsy, like paper walls you could push through with one hand. That's the moment to move. To say yes. To take the first step, however small, while the fire is still hot. And here's the beautiful part. Once you act on it, you'll never see yourself the same way again. You'll start to trust yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you listened when it mattered most. You proved to yourself that when the moment came, you didn't look away. You didn't hide. You stepped forward. That's when real transformation begins, not when life hands you a perfect plan, but in the exact second you decide you're done waiting for permission. So here we are. You've seen the truth hiding behind your excuses. You've felt the pull of the future calling your name. And you've learned that nothing changes until you do. Let the old self die. Let the version of you that was built on fear, on playing small, on staying comfortable, finally take its last breath. And in that space, let something new rise. A self that doesn't ask for permission. A self that trusts the unknown. A self that knows, deep down, that the life you dream of is already reaching for you. This is not about waiting for the right time. It's about deciding that this is the time. Because if not now, then when? If not you, then who? Walk out of this moment with your head high, not because everything is fixed, but because you've chosen the path where you can't go back. The old you got you here. The true you will take you further than you ever imagined. And one day, you'll look back, not with regret for what you left behind, but with gratitude that you were brave enough to step into who you were always meant to be. So take the step. Close the door. Burn the bridge. And walk, no, run, into the life that's been waiting for you all along.